Hi everyone, and welcome to this interview with me. I'm Oliver Hatfield, VP of Sustainable Fertilisers here at Argus Media, and I'm joined today by Magnus Ankerstrand, and he's President of Yara Clean Ammonia at Yara International. Good morning, Magnus.
Good morning.
And today we're going to be discussing green ammonia and the role that green ammonia will be playing in the energy transition, serving as a low carbon marine fuel. And we're also going to be finding out a bit more about the role that Yara is playing in the energy transition and the decarbonisation of the marine fuel sector, which is a hard to abate sector. And when we think about, at least when I think about the fertiliser sector, definitely Yara is one of the furthest ahead, I think, in its response to the needs of sustainability, but also in the opportunities that can bring, that will inevitably present. So let's get into the questions. On that note, Magnus, how do you see new market opportunities such as the maritime industry for Yara, and what's the role that you envision for the company in energy transition, the transition to a low carbon economy?
Yeah, no, thank you for that question. Yara today is one of the biggest fertilizer producer in the world, and certainly the biggest ammonia shipper and trader in the world. So from that perspective, it's both imperative for us to do something about ammonia and develop blue and green ammonia in order to reduce our carbon footprint, but also we believe it represents a significant business opportunity because ammonia has a lot of attributes as a zero emission fuel for the shipping industry, and also as a fuel for electricity production in some countries with relatively limited or expensive renewable electricity production. So both those two markets represent a significant opportunity compared to the existing ammonia market. And then on top of that, of course, is the whole fertilizer sector and the nitrogen part of the fertilizer sector, in which, of course, green ammonia will represent a significant contribution in reducing the carbon footprint of fertilizer and therefore also the carbon footprint of agriculture in general.
Yeah. Okay, thank you for that. If we think about specifically the maritime industry, what do you see as the key challenges and the opportunities for that sector? As it thinks about choosing green ammonia as a low carbon fuel.
Well, I think obviously there is a change required on the engine side in terms of actually being able to use ammonia as a fuel, and I think that in itself isn't a moon landing in terms of a technology breakthrough, but obviously it's a change that needs to happen, and also it requires investment and obviously for new build that's the most relevant setting, I think, in terms of starting to use ammonia as a fuel and making new build vessels ammonia ready, as the industry itself calls it. So obviously that's an area where there needs to be a change. But the good news is that we see a lot of shipping companies being very forward leaning, wanting now to invest in the first prototype vessels. Also big engine producers such as MAN are working on developing engines that can use ammonia as a fuel. So from a technology perspective, we believe that will go in the right direction. Then obviously the other big element in addition to the technology side is availability, both in terms of having ammonia available in the relevant ports, such as the big ports and hubs such as Singapore, Rotterdam, Houston, Santos, etc. But also, of course, that the actual product is there and available, that there's enough ammonia to go around. I think the shipping industry represents such a big opportunity in volumes that it significantly outpaces what's currently being traded globally of ammonia, which of course will require significant additional production. And of course, change on the production side from regular ammonia to blue ammonia and green ammonia as well.
Yeah. Okay, thanks for that. Turning, combination of regulatory and economic. So, I mean, low carbon green ammonia, the costs of it are substantially higher than the grey alternative, although they're getting closer if we think about current ammonia pricing. But I guess the point here is that the market's probably not going to happen by itself. So some regulatory incentives will be necessary. What do you think those are? What's required to get the green ammonia market active, particularly on the maritime side? Sorry.
Yeah, no, I think the most important thing is that there are incentives needed all along the value chain. It's not enough only to put efforts in place, incentives or taxes, regulations on the production side. You also need to think the entire value chain, and of course, the shipping industry in particular. It's important to have sort of foresight in terms of what sort of regulation will come and how it will be implemented. And currently, the shipping industry has relatively firm targets, relatively stretched targets in terms of reducing carbon emissions as a whole, particularly when you consider the increase in shipping that's anticipated. And although 2050, which is IMO's target in terms of a 50% reduction, it sounds far away. But obviously, if you're a ship owner and thinking about building a vessel today, your vessel will still be sailing most likely beyond 2050, which makes it a very relevant problem. And I think looking at that, there's no way that the shipping industry can reach those targets without starting to use some zero carbon fuels. And from that perspective, that's a good incentive. But I think both we, but also a lot of the major players in the shipping industry themselves, require even more foresight, and some are even advocating for a $200 or thereabouts CO2 tax on emissions, as an example, which of course would be an important incentive, and also level out pricing and the difference in cost between green and blue ammonia compared to existing fuel types. Because one thing is, of course, the comparison to gray ammonia prices, but of course, for a ship owner, the relevant comparison is to other fuels plus whatever taxes that will be applied on top of that. So I think from that perspective, that kind of regulation, and particularly IMO regulation, will be critical. And then, of course, on the production side, there will be regulations as well, both regulations and incentives in terms of motivating for a green shift. And particularly in Europe, we see that both through the European trading scheme, but also in terms of the different support mechanisms that are now coming in place for green ammonia.
Yeah, excellent. Okay. Actually, a related question to some of the points you made there in that last answer around pricing. How do you? I appreciate this is probably a multifaceted question, but how do you expect green and blue ammonia to be priced, at least initially? What kind of models do you expect to see? I mean, are we going to see kind of fixed long-term contracts like you have seen in LNG, or is it going to be kind of grey ammonia indexation links to carbon pricing, or how do you think about that?
No, I think as you say, it's still early days, and I think we'll probably see a mix, I would say, of pricing mechanisms. But I think particularly for big, large greenfield projects, particularly within green ammonia, I think we're likely to see at least a significant element of fixed pricing or contracted pricing that sort of related and linked also to the cost of developing the project, obviously, but also the renewable energy that's required to make it happen. So I think we'll see more features like that than what we're doing in the current ammonia market. And then, of course, as the market develops, thinking many years out, you could very well see a shift to more into a more liquid market, and where pricing is set more in the sense that we know today from the ammonia market or comparable markets.
Yeah, that makes sense. Okay, and then we've mentioned milestones, legislative milestones like IMO 2050, but you also referred to the fact that ship builders need to be thinking about this today. So What do you see as the timeline for the adoption of ammonia powering shipping? When do we expect to see significant volumes of ammonia being used for that end use?
I think we will. I mean, we will see the first prototypes on the engine side coming in the next few years, and most likely also the first prototype vessels coming relatively soon. And I think in terms of adopting green ammonia or blue ammonia as a shipping fuel, that will sort of increase in tandem with that. But I think right now, probably the supply side is as much a limitation as the demand as such. I think as we get the first prototype vessels, the first early movers going on this, and we and you know, players in the ammonia industry like ourselves plan to make the ammonia available for that, and then the market sees that this is actually working, and you know, that it can be done, and then that the ammonia is available. I think we'll sort of in tandem see an increase of projects being announced, as well as vessels being contracted or being built and ready for green ammonia, and that there will be sort of a development there where supply and demand need to go sort of hand in hand, because and also, you know, much more linked, you know, in terms of contracts and agreements between suppliers and users, because that's essentially how it has to work, given that there's no liquid market or mass availability of ammonia today. If you want to you know, change a portion of your vessels, or if you have a certain need of volumes, you will need to contract that, or at least have some sort of agreement with companies and suppliers who are able to supply it. And then on the other side, we'll of course look for partners on the downstream side to make sure that their projects are viable.
Yeah. Okay. As I understand it, Yara, you kind of got a mix of different projects that you're planning, some green, some blue. I mean, green being carbon free seems to have, you know, less potential hurdles in some sense. But what do you think? I mean, and blue seems likely in certain circumstances to see certain hurdles. So, as an example, I mean, if you think about using CO, you know, where the CO2 will go, how permanently it will be stored, and so on. How much do you see that being an issue? For example, in Europe, if I can choose an example, do you think it will be acceptable to use that carbon for enhanced oil recovery? How do you think about that topic?
Well, no, I mean, to answer your first question, I think in terms of on sort of a long-term sustainability basis, we definitely believe that green ammonia will be the ultimate answer, and I think, you know, a lot of good judges seem to agree with that, including the European Union, sort of points that out as well. Although they as well as us seem to believe that blue ammonia will be required for the transition, also because it is so much more available, and also infrastructure is already there. I think obviously the challenge with blue ammonia is that it's not fully carbon free, and also if or there will of course need to be guarantees or surveillance in place to make sure that the CO2 actually goes where it's supposed to go, and you know, not least that it stays there. But I think on top of that, enhanced oil recovery is a challenge, and we don't particularly see that as a solution when it comes to producing blue hydrogen, blue ammonia. I mean, that's at least from our thinking at this point, we would be looking for projects where enhanced oil recovery is not a part of the solution.
Yeah,
but that is used for depleted fields, and in that way is not contributing to more oil and gas production.
Yeah, that makes sense. Okay, thank you. Thinking about ammonia itself, I mean, there are, you know, effectively in the marine fuel sector, there's competition between alternatives, carbon-free alternatives or lower carbon alternatives. Let's put it like that. So, do you think that ammonia has certain advantages? I'm thinking perhaps about the network the existing network that it has in infrastructure and so on. I mean, make the pitch for ammonia versus other fuels if you can.
Yeah, no, I think I mean, particularly attractive about ammonia compared to hydrogen as maybe the first comparison is, of course, that the infrastructure to ship it and transport it is already there to a very large extent. Of course, there's the last mile piece that, as it pertains to the actual bunkering that needs to be developed. But other than that, we have the infrastructure to ship it, to store it, and essentially, when your SMR is replaced with an electrolyzer, the rest of the value chain is ready. And of course, the same goes for blue ammonia as well, once the CCS portion is in place. Also, ammonia has a lot of attributes compared to hydrogen in terms of storability and challenges to shipping it. It needs to be chilled down to -33, as opposed to -253, and it contains 1.5 times the amount of energy compared to hydrogen as well. So from those perspectives, and particularly where the ammonia can be used directly and not tracked back into hydrogen, it has a lot of advantages. I think when it comes to other fuel sources, thin fuels and different other sources, from a pricing perspective, green ammonia even is probably going to be more attractive and a lower price than those alternatives. And also some other alternatives like biomethanol and so on is probably unlikely to be available in a massive scale outside countries like Brazil, as an example. So from that perspective, and also from a timing perspective, we believe that ammonia will be a very attractive alternative.
Yeah, okay. And then, so you're obviously betting on ammonia clearly, but so what? So this requires, I guess, essentially taking on, although Yara historically has heritage in the energy sector, but this is effectively a new sector for Yara as a fertilizer company or a transitioning company. Where do you see your position in this new sector in thinking about the value chain? Just as a supplier, or will it extend beyond that? What kind of role do you envisage the company taking?
Well, I think probably the main attribute of Yara when it comes to ammonia today is that we are present all along the value chain, and from that perspective, we have a large network of our own production plants, our net importing ammonia plants, but also our third-party purchases and sales of ammonia that makes up a very flexible system in terms of reliability, and we're able to replace one source if one source goes out, and so on. And that's really the role that we anticipate going forward as well as we move into clean ammonia is to have that value chain integrating role and making sure that supplies are available and backed by our own production, and that we can deliver ammonia worldwide where it's needed. But we're not anticipating to go far downstream into other fuel sources or anything of that nature. But of course, where we are very, very far downstream today is on the ag side. And when it comes to developing markets for sustainable fertilizer, for specialized fertilizer, and so on. And I think when it comes to demand creation, working with food companies in terms of green fertilizer, greening the ag value chain, that's an area where we expect to remain relatively deep down into the chain.
Yes, yeah, you have a quite unique position in that respect, definitely. Okay. Okay, we're coming towards the end of the time we've allotted for this. Just maybe one last question. If you had a message to communicate to the maritime industry that you think would be there to accelerate the adoption of green ammonia in their sector, what would that message be?
No, I think speaking to some of the most proactive players, I don't think they need much messaging. I think they're very well on the path to create something very exciting here. But I think in general, I would say start learning about ammonia, start understanding the features and that it is a fuel that is actually available worldwide today. It needs scaling up, but it's based on an infrastructure that is relatively easily scaled. But I think that's really what we need to have more players come into this, and bigger portion of the shipping industry actually understanding and realizing the benefits of ammonia, and because that's the only way that we can scale it up faster.
Great. Okay, well, thank you very much for answering all those questions in a very clear and comprehensive way, Magnus. It's time to wrap up. I've just got a few points to add. If you're watching this video and you want to learn more about the role that ammonia and actually other alternative low carbon fuels like methanol will play in the future for marine fuels, Argus is producing an ebook which is called Methanol versus Green Ammonia: The Future of Marine Fuels. You should be able to click a link next to this video to learn more from that ebook. Also consider that Argus will be running another virtual conference on green ammonia. That's coming later this year. In the dates of the 7th to the 9th of December. And Yara is a supporting partner of ours, a founding partner for that event. And you'll be able to hear more from experts like Magnus on this topic and many other related topics. And that includes, of course, fertilizers, which we mentioned today, but also power generation and even to other hard to abate sectors like metals. The registration for that, I believe, is open now. And the last point is please consider also that in about a few weeks' time, we'll be publishing a strategy report covering green ammonia, which is going to be looking at many of the questions that we've answered today, and again, a lot more, thinking about how the ammonia market will evolve, particularly in connection with its role as an energy vector, as a low carbon energy source. So please bear those issues and opportunities, if you like, in mind. So that's all from me and from Magnus. Thanks again, Magnus, for joining, and thank you all for joining the discussion.
Thank you.